Welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest in this episode is Nick Lavery. He is a proud husband and father to two young sons. He is also considered the first Special Forces operator to return to combat as an above-the-knee amputee. In 2013, Nick and his detachment were attacked by a partner force in what is referred to as a green-on-blue attack. The attacker used a belt-fed machine gun called a PKM and opened fire on U.S. troops, initiating a complex ambush. Nick sustained an estimated 6 rounds to his right leg, leaving it completely mangled and shattered. Nick was losing vast amounts of blood, and he was convinced that he was going to die. Through the screams and the chaos, he knew that the outlook was grim. Miraculously, Nick survived this harrowing incident. The details of his incredible story are contained within this episode. This attack is considered to date the worst ever insider attack in the global war on terror era. Join us as we extract the wisdom from Nick's hard-earned lessons on life, leadership, resilience, and most importantly, fatherhood.
I was wounded 3 times in this deployment. 12 U.S. casualties total, 3 of which were killed. Belt-fed machine gun. It's a powerful weapon system. That thing can do work out to 500-600 meters all day long, and it can shoot vehicles to shit. It can shoot people to shit. I treated myself initially with a series of tourniquets. I would eventually treat myself with what's known as an internal pressure dressing. He showed up eventually. I'd already put 2 tourniquets on, and he got there. And the look on his face confirmed what I already knew to be true. Like, this is where it ends. Emotional regulation may be the differentiator. Zoom out, extract from that, to be able to make a logical decision. And more often than not, logic and emotion are antagonistic of each other.
Nick Lavery, welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you. I'm super excited today, so welcome.
Likewise, man. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just for those listening, this is a special occasion for us because we're in studio. I'm joined with Brandon, my co-host, finally face-to-face with Nick Lavery. So let me high-level summary your bio just to level set for the audience, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So you're first and foremost a husband and a father of 2 young boys. You're the founder and CEO of Precision Components, LLC, where you and your team Machine, train, advise, enable, and inspire organizations and individuals to unlock capacity and increase capability. You are also the best-selling author of Objective Secure, the battle-tested guide to goal achievement, and just a few of your awards from the military: a Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, 3 Bronze Stars, and a Bronze Star with a V for Valor. So really mediocre resume there. So.
Yeah, just getting warmed up, bro.
Just getting warmed up.
That's it.
Yeah, so Nick, obviously you've got a pretty incredible story with what you went through in Afghanistan on deployment. I'd like to talk a little bit about that for the audience to gain some of the lessons from that, but what we really want to get towards is Nick the father and the lessons that you've learned throughout life in the military and how you've applied it into being the best dad possible.
Great.
So why don't we just start at a high level, talk about really quickly kind of like how you got into the military, becoming a Green Beret, and then we'll get to that fateful deployment where you experienced this.
Yeah, man. So my interest in the military started when I was in high school.
Okay.
And the reason for it, it's interesting, and it catches people off guard. Because they see me, they see the cover of the book, they see the cool guy, like
Right.
I'm this like superhero, and this is just the way I've been my whole life. Nothing's farther from the truth.
Exactly.
I began looking at the military because of this massive void I had in me. And I was really yearning for strength. I was yearning to be respected. I grew up a small, believe it or not, insecure, scared kid who was the new kid in school every single year, all the way up until eventually I got to college. And that's hard on a young person. You know, bullying today is taken much more seriously than it was back then. You know, back when I was a kid, it was just kind of part of being a kid.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be feared, really, because I had lived so much of my life on the other end of that spectrum. I wanted to know the opposite.
Yeah.
And I felt becoming a member of the military could maybe give me that. It's like kind of a game plan. only that stopped that from becoming real was I started getting recruited to play football in college.
Okay.
So, I was decent enough in athletics and I really excelled in football. So the only reason why I went to school was for football. I was a horrible academic. I did the bare minimum, just skate by. But I was decent in sports. So went to school for football primarily. And then my sophomore year, I just turned 19 years old, was 9/11. And, it's one of those moments where as long as you were old enough to appreciate the gravity of what was going on around you, it's likely a moment that you will never forget.
Yeah.
Where you were, maybe even what you were wearing, who you were with, right? Like that level of detail.
I remember the whole day. Yeah.
So that was the catalyst for me. And I really struggled to stay in school beyond that.
Okay.
Ultimately decided to stay, and I grinded out my degree and then began looking at options to enter the military after I graduated. And I felt like I wanted to go into special operations. At a minimum, I felt like my physical attributes could be utilized in that capacity. But more so than that, man, it was I wanted to make as much of a difference as one person could make.
Right.
This was not intended to be a career or a lifestyle. This was get in, get to the tip of the spear, kick some ass, get some justice, get out and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Okay.
That was it, man. So becoming a member of special operations was the way I felt I could do that. And I didn't know much about the military. My parents weren't in the military.
Yeah.
So I started doing some research, like what the Navy SEALs do, what do the Green Berets do. Aside from movies and books, I really had no idea. So I needed to educate myself, which I did. And ultimately, I landed on the Army because it gave me not only the fastest route to get into special operations by virtue of a Special Forces contract option known as an 18 X-ray contract, but I was also drawn to unconventional warfare as I began to read and learn about what Green Berets do, aside from John Wayne and Rambo, what they really do. I was like, oh, you know what? This actually is tickling something in my heart. So that was the route I went.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Please.
And can you just define what the mission of the Green Berets are? Because I think a lot of people may not actually be aware of that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So our primary mission is that of unconventional warfare, which is a sexy term, and you can Google the definition, and there's a lot of buzzwords that jump out in there. You start to go into these rabbit holes, it gets quite complex quite quickly. But the major component of that are the two terms with and through. And that's really what Green Berets do. Green Berets work with and through indigenous personnel to achieve a mission. That is the differentiator between Green Berets and the other elements of the military. Now, we're not the only unit that works, quote, bilaterally with and through, but that is we are
it's
built
your core
specifically
mission, your core purpose
to do that, which is why unconventional warfare is kind of at the top, and then you've got all these other mission sets or core tasks that we're expected to do, foreign internal defense, counterterrorism, direct action. But we perform those other mission sets by virtue of with and through. So really when you break down what a Green Beret is, or what an ODA does, a fancy acronym for a team, while we are warfighters and warriors, and we jump out of planes, and we break down doors and shoot bad guys in the face, and we do all the cool guy movie stuff, Green Berets are teachers, we're advisors, and we solve complex problems. That's really it.
I've had the privilege of not only just working with, in a military capacity, several Green Berets, but knowing them outside the uniform too. And you guys definitely have, there's a character about Green Berets that it's kind of an intangible thing, but I think that with and through kind of ethos shows up. Everyone I've met, at least, has kind of had that aura about them, and especially too, like in where they've trained me, right? They've given me training or coaching. It's just very evident that is something you guys not only enjoy doing, but you're very good at doing, and I think there's a lot of lessons that we can take from that outside of the military application of it, to where as men, we can take our gifts and strengths and pay it forward by investing it, having that willing heart to coach and train and mentor to those who are willing to receive and maybe have the capability to do more. Maybe if you can just take a quick tangent on that, how have you applied all of those lessons to the other aspects of your life?
Man, pretty much throughout all the other aspects of my life. And the one thing that comes to mind as you ask that, because I could take this in probably 100 different directions, the one that comes to mind is humility. It's humility, man, which is a powerful term and a weapon for those of us that choose to deploy it. An offensive weapon is humility. And,
like
me as this 24-year-old, combatives, MMA, football player, athlete, go through all this advanced training, 2+ years, get to the teams, get into Afghanistan, get to work. Like, I'm the man, right? I'm the man. I'm here, and you're going to do what I tell you to do because I know what's right and you don't. And you're going to listen. And as long as you listen to what I say, we're going to win. That was my mentality. And that's probably the mentality of most young special operations operators.
Yeah.
You can't blame them for that. Type A personalities with a lot of advanced training and a lot of capability.
Yeah.
Roger
I mean,
that.
you feel very confident.
100%, you know. And I learned very quickly that while I have all this knowledge and these special skills and I can do a bunch of things, I found myself learning from not only my teammates, which I learned from constantly, 24/7, but also those that I was there to advise. And here's where the power comes in, is regardless of how great you are, your skill set, what you can do, humility is a sustain. It's a constant. So even though I'm there to advise you and lead you and influence you and so we can create effects together, I'm going to learn from you and it's going to make us better. I think that that's probably one of, if not the greatest takeaways from what I've extracted from life as a Green Beret.
Yeah.
Because for one, it was just such a massive shift for me.
Right.
From this like hyper confident, borderline cocky, borderline arrogant place that I was at to say, whoa, this is completely inaccurate, for one. And then two, seeing the effects of going in there with that humility and weaponizing and operationalizing it for the sake of the mission.
Man, that's powerful. It's a great reminder, I think, too, for men in general, right? We want to feel powerful. We want to feel capable and dangerous and all, pick the words. And if we pause and allow humility to have a place, it's also, it disarms the tension between the people you're trying to lead anyway. But man, what a powerful example of how important it is. So let's get back to working towards where the green on blue attack happened. What number deployment was that for you? And then I guess just set the stage for how that actually occurred.
Yeah, so this was my third trip into Afghanistan. This was in the fall of 2012. We infilled in September, and we were set to come out in April. So 6-month deployment, April of 2013. We were going to be replaced. And I was wounded 3 times in this deployment. You mentioned 3 Purple Hearts. Those were all awarded to me during the same deployment.
Wow. Jeez.
So the first one was pretty quick. We'd only been on the ground for a few weeks. I took some grenade shrapnel to the back of my shoulder. It really wasn't that big of a deal, man. I mean, it blew like a lemon-sized hole in me, but some gauze and ace bandage, really, that's all it took,
Yeah.
About 6 or so weeks after that was when I was wounded for the second time. I took an AK-47 round to the face. Maybe you can see the scar. They did a pretty good job with it. I had the ideal human on the ground to take care of me. It was a Army Reserve trauma doc, so reservist.
Yep.
In his full-time life, he's a plastic surgeon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just happened to get this guy.
Yeah, man. That's wild. I'm in the Guard, and I've found that there's a surprising upside to the reserve component.
Absolutely.
Where a lot of these guys and gals have outside experience that they're able to just pour in. So it's not, I used to make fun of the Guard too when I was active duty. And anyway, what an incredible turn of events that's the guy who was there for you.
Yeah, go figure. So, and then fast forward to March of 2013, and those that I just lost. March is the month that comes after February. I know I got the Boston accent, so half the audience is like, what did he just say? Let's clarify where we are within time and space.
That's
so
great.
It's March of 2013, and we only got a couple, 2-3 weeks left, and then we had that insider attack. So the green on blue incident, and kind of just the wave tops we were set to go on an operation, meeting a partner force at our camp. Dude jumped up on the back of a Ford Ranger pickup truck that had a PKM mounted to it and just unloaded.
What's a PKM?
Sorry, good question.
Civilian.
It's a belt-fed machine gun, Russian-made belt-fed machine gun.
7.62 millimeter.
Yeah,
I forget by what.
By 54 rimmed. It's a powerful weapon system. That thing can do work out to 500-600 meters all day long, and it can chew vehicles to shit. It can chew people to shit. This was about 30 feet away, so catastrophic at that range.
Yeah, man.
So 12 U.S. casualties total, 3 of which were killed. Myself and another 8 wounded, varying degrees, and most of the damage to me obviously was to my right leg. I took estimated maybe 5 or 6 rounds to my right leg, which just decimated it.
Yeah.
Looked more like a like a shock got a hold of it and just like ripped it to shreds, so.
Dang.
I treated myself initially with a series of tourniquets. I would eventually treat myself with what's known as an internal pressure dressing, which is as brutal as it sounds like.
You describing that in the book, I was like,
Yeah, it can make you wince.
Yeah, I probably would have died right there. I don't know if I have the gut to make that happen.
For those that are reading his book, he goes into great detail into a lot of this stuff, and it's an excellent part of the book. So it's rough to hear, but it's excellent. Like, he actually shows how he saved his own life and then had his comrades save his life as well. So.
Well, and I want to, if you can just real quickly, you talk about, or I've heard you talk about that part where you were so convinced you were dead that you were like ordering the Deltas, the medics, to just leave me, bro. Get to those who need it more. Like, can you just talk through, like, in that exact moment? I mean, like, were you just in pure adrenaline, or did you actually have presence of mind? Or
certainly adrenaline, but I do feel like I was pretty aware of what was going on.
Wow.
And the dude that got to me, he wasn't one of our medics.
Oh, okay, so he's just a teammate.
A teammate. Okay. Technically an attachment. His name's Jason, an attachment, but he had been with us since even before we deployed.
Gotcha.
So very much a teammate.
Gotcha.
And a stud. He showed up eventually. I'd already put 2 tourniquets on, and he got there, and the look on his face confirmed what I already knew to be true. Like, this is where it ends, Prior to this, I had been on both sides of what we call triage.
Yep.
Which, those that are unfamiliar, when you're dealing with a mass casualty scenario, multiple people that are injured, we categorize them based off of the degree of injury, likelihood of survivability, and the resources we have to treat all of them.
Yep. Sure. It's a cold calculus.
It's brutal. Yeah, it's brutal. And the far end of that is known as the expectant category. So these are those that are almost certainly going to die. Barring some sort of miracle, they likely will die. So as a person who's applying aid, you do not invest moments or resources on expectant categories, patients, unless or until you work through the other priorities. Yep. And then you can do what you can.
Yep.
Right. I had been on both sides of that equation in that decision-making process prior to this event, and I can assure you that it is one of the most difficult protocols to adhere to.
Yeah.
When you got some of your friends that are laying there.
Your brothers. I mean, these are your brothers you fight alongside with, right?
Dying or moving in that direction, asking for help, scared, in pain, and you ignore that to be able to work on those that are deemed a higher priority. Really difficult to do.
Right.
So in my mind, when Jason gets to me, I've already put myself in that expecting category.
Sure.
Right.
So he gets to me, and I can see him thinking through what do I do here, and he begins to like take action, and I'm trying to make that decision easier for him.
Right.
Saying, bro, I'm not the guy. I'm done. I don't know how many guys are down at this point. There were 11 others that were down.
Yeah.
But I can hear the screams, like the chaos is going on. There are bodies everywhere. I know I'm going to die. I know others need aid that are almost certainly a higher priority. So I'm trying to help him make that really hard choice.
Yeah.
And he essentially ignored me. He put on another tourniquet, and he got IV access for blood or meds that may need to come on board.
Sure.
And at that point, he was pretty much at the end of his medical capacity. So we said a quick goodbye, and he moved on.
Dang, man. Well, it's, again, trying to draw the lesson from that. Most of us probably will never be in a similar situation, but prioritizing in those critical moments, whatever the event may be, is leadership, right? So you provided leadership, even though you were the casualty to your friend in that sense. And I think for those of us who won't be in that same situation, that's probably one of the lessons we can draw out of that is to, in stressful, critical situations, pare down to what is absolutely essential and go work towards those things first, because it's a proven process, right? So
and not to go too deep down the same rabbit hole, George, you're taking us on, but emotional regulation.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Definitely.
And
absolutely.
We can talk about just using special operations as an example.
Yeah.
How fast you can run 2 miles, how fast, what your max deadlift is, what your shot group looks like, all these like performance metrics, which are part of us and our ability to perform a service.
Sure.
Emotional regulation may be the differentiator between elite performers, high performers, regardless of the sector you're in or profession you're in, and everybody else. The ability to recognize the emotion that is running through you, because that's part of being a human being. I don't care what you do or how you do it. It's part of being a human being. Recognize what it is, be able to gain control of that, zoom out, extract from that to be able to make a logical decision. And more often than not, logic and emotion are antagonistic of each other.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to make a logical decision in times of high emotion.
Right.
So that is an example I like to pull out from that event as well.
That's
Not
good.
just for me, but for Jason and for the others that were responding to countless high stress variables that
Right.
are coming in every millisecond, to be able to extract from that emotion, to be able to make a logical and objective decision.
man. That's great. It's a beautiful point. Okay, so you do survive this. We'll leave a lot of the details to the book, and
Cool.
you've talked it a million times elsewhere, but you were literally on the verge of death. I think they even gave you like the wrong blood transfusion on the flight or something, but against all the odds, you survived, right? So now you're, I assume, back home in Walter Reed, recovering, and like, I guess just what was the initial recovery process like? And we'll get into kind of your mental state. How did you unpack all this? How did you eventually, release this difficult thing? Let's work towards that. In your story.
So Walter Reed, I was in the intensive care unit for, 6 or 7 weeks, mostly battling infection.
Okay.
So infection had set in, and it was just chewing my leg to pieces, and it can kill you.
Yeah.
Right? So my journey began as me in surgery 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a week. They were just incrementally amputating my leg higher and higher, and just cutting out infection and rotted tissue and dead muscle and infected bone. So in surgery, wake up, a little less leg, rinse, repeat over and over and over and over and over again.
Jeez.
Ended up being about, 35, 37 or so surgeries on my right leg. So that was kind of the initial part of that. There's a story I like to share during
Please.
this phase because it highlights an important point here. And I knew from that point in the intensive care unit, and I'm whacked out. I'm on ketamine and Dilaudid, and I'm out of surgery. I got like pink leprechauns zipping through my room. And I was like, I'm on a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
I barely know where I am, but I'm cognizant enough to have a appreciation of the gravity of my injury. Like I know my leg's slowly disappearing.
Right.
Right.
But it was at that point that I made the decision that I would go back to the team. I would go back to doing what I do. That was there. And I use the word decision. I almost use it loosely because I almost didn't really even see an alternative option for me.
You're fully committed to it.
That's it.
It was
Like,
your only option.
This is not just what I do, but this is who I am. And my interpretation of that has changed over the last decade.
Sure.
But at that point, this is who I am. This is what I was put on planet Earth to do. There is no alternative. There's no plan B. There's no contingency.
Yeah.
This is it. So I was able to decide the what I'm going to do right there and then. I hadn't a clue as to how, but that's a different question. It's a very different question.
It is.
I think a lot of people get stuck, whether it's on the back end of a traumatic event or just a bad day or week or year, figuring out what am I going to do? Asking themselves that question. What am I going to do? And when you can answer that and define it, even though it may change, it allows you to proceed all energy and effort to how. Entirely different question. Now we're just trying to solve an equation.
Right.
And there is a way to solve it.
Yep.
It's a series of variables, and slowly over time they become constants, and you plug and plug and plug and plug.
That's so
So
good.
my mind was made up then. And there's a story I like to share that kind of highlights this. And I had only been in the intensive care unit for maybe 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
My mother, my father, my sister, they're there. And it's a round robin of medical professionals coming in, like
Right.
nonstop, round the clock, boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden, at one point, I look up, and there's a bunch of people wearing black suits in my room and all around the room. And I'm like, this is new. And then in walks the first lady. At the time was Michelle Obama.
Okay.
And even on all the ketamine, there's no mistaking Michelle Obama. Very recognizable person.
Right.
And almost like this aura around her. Again, I'm on a lot of meds, but this is like what I remember. I knew right away who it was.
Right.
And I'm like, oh wow, okay, this makes sense. The Secret Service everywhere, and I
Yeah.
got it. And she comes in, and she walks up bedside to me, and she's talking to me, and I'm basically just mumbling nothingness back to her.
Right.
You know, but I could sense her genuine caring in that moment. So she kind of shifted off of me because I was making precisely 0 sense. And she's talking to my parents, and they're having a quick conversation. And all of a sudden I interrupt her, and I go, ma'am, I need you to do me a favor. And I said it clear enough where she almost like
It was disarming.
was startled. Like,
Right.
oh my gosh, she just said something that I understood. So she hones back in on me, and she kind of leans down. She's a foot away from my face. And I said, I need you to tell your husband something. I need you to tell him that I'm still an asset, that I will be back, and don't give up on me. And there's this pause in the room, and she starts crying. So she's crying. My mother starts crying. I think the Secret Service agents were crying. It's like this emotional moment that's going on. I was dead serious. This was not a sympathy play. I simply saw this as a strategic opportunity to get a message to the guy.
You're pitching yourself,
So that's it. I get a message to the guy. And if he's going to listen to anybody, perhaps it's his wife. Right. So, I just use that as an example to just kind of describe my mentality at that time. Yeah. Even though it was really early on and had a long road, the decision was made then.
That's incredible. As you were saying that, I'm already relating it to my own life and where I'm at right now, and I've made the decision. I have to figure out the how. It's a great distinction about you have to decide for yourself what your that mission,
right, and
then figure it out, because otherwise you'll just be stuck forever. You'll just stay trying to figure out, well, what do I do? Where do I go? And if you have no guiding light, you're never going to get there. So amazing, man. To piggyback off of like having important people come by through the book, one of the things that really stuck out to me in your recovery process was, you'd have generals or someone come in to the care facility, and the nurses like could care less about who this person was or how important they were, because they were so committed to your recovery and the other recovery, those recovering, that any unnecessary distraction was completely cut from the experience, right? And so these people who are usually used to having all this pomp and circumstance wherever they go, right, was basically snubbed. And I forget the specifics in the book about it, but it really just stuck out to me that where in our lives do we need to really stay that committed to the focus? And I guess if you want to just expand upon that experience through the recovery process, rehab and everything.
Yeah, I describe Walter Reed as the greatest place on earth that you never want to see. Because if you're there, it's likely under some unfortunate circumstances. Aside from you being stationed there, and that's just where you work.
Sure.
But for the majority of us, family, patients, it's usually on the back end of something negative having happened. Mm-hmm. But it also is a location that, to me, proves that angels exist. Yeah. I mean, these people, they do, and they asked for it, but they do some of the most difficult, nasty work daily with a smile on their face, like happy to be there. And when you're laying there as a type A, aggressive, highly confident warfighter, you're used to being the person on the other end of the phone when there's a problem. Roger that, I'm en route. Yeah. That's who you are at this point. To go to basically being entirely dependent on other people, that in itself is brutal. Brutal. Yeah. I mean, basic life functions. Feeding yourself, bathing yourself, the bathroom. Like, you need someone to help you do all these things. That in itself can crush people. Yeah.
That's that humility part you were talking about.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. It's brutal. Like, it can be a real hard shock to your pride. And that in itself, I think, can spiral down to a really negative, dark place. But these people that work there, man, they make that much easier for you. And I can't remember how many times I'd have a nurse or a doc or, just see me in anguish about what I needed them to help me do or to do for me. Yeah. And not only would they do it, but they'd stop and be like, "Hey, Nick, like, this is what we're here to do." They could see it, and they take 2 seconds out of their busy days and be like, "We're here to do this. This is what we do. We're glad to be here to do this. This is why we exist. The same reason why you exist to go do what you do. We're here to do this." Yeah. And just those little extra coming from them paid just massive dividends.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd like to unpack the mental a little bit there, and I guess maybe it's a hard thing too with. I'm sure there was a lot of anger and frustration from how you got injured, right? It wasn't engaging the enemy. It was a partner force turned inward, right? We call it green on blue for those listening. One, can you talk about how the Taliban would basically extort people to do such a thing in the first place? And then your mental process with all of the emotions around that initially, and then how you were able to kind of release it and allow forgiveness and acceptance of it enter.
Sure. And, and this tactic goes back centuries.
Oh, sure.
Since
Yeah,
the
it's nothing
beginning
new.
of conflict. Taliban got really great at it.
Yeah.
And I give them credit because they don't want to see us toe-to-toe on the battlefield.
Yeah.
That's a loss 99 times out of 100. So how do you do it? And they're resilient fighters, and they're smart fighters,
Yep.
and they're tactical fighters. Going back to like the dawn of humanity in that era of that area of the world, they're known for historic, resilient fighters.
Yeah.
And the same exists today. So, yeah, they would, they'd get a hold of someone that they knew had access to us. And in this particular example, it was a member of the Afghan National Police Force that we had been working with kind of on and off throughout the duration of this deployment. And about 9 guys with AK-47s walk into this guy's house in the middle of the night. He's a husband and father to, I think, 5 kids. And they say, here's your 2 options. Option A is you do this attack for us. You will be killed, for sure. But if you do this, we're going to take care of your family for the rest of their lives. Option B is we brutalize your entire family right now in front of you, and then we slaughter them, and then we slaughter you. Either way, you're dead in this equation.
Yeah.
But if you choose option A, you get to spare your family. Not only spare them, but they will be taken care of.
And they make good on that promise.
And that's what makes that tactic successful is they've built up a degree of credibility by doing this so many times. And that's what the predicament this guy was put into.
Yeah.
So he did what he did, and it was part of a complex ambush. So when he opened up fire on us, there was about 25 Taliban fighters that had our camp almost entirely surrounded.
Gotcha.
That all began to engage. It took a couple months before my team eventually got back to the States, and then, of course, they all came to see me at the hospital, and they had gathered a bunch of intel and information in between to get those details I just shared with you, and they told me that. And up to that point, I was filled with a lot of rage and anger.
Yeah.
It's you accept your potential fate when you decide to go into this profession. And if I die on the battlefield, roger that. I take that on, no problem.
Yep.
The betrayal aspect of it is brutal.
Definitely.
It's like out of all the gunfights I've been in and explosions and multiple, like all the things, it's like this is how I'm going to die in the moment. And then after the fact, like this is how I lost my leg at the hands of someone who I was teaching how to do things.
Yeah.
That sense of betrayal is tough. Yeah. So it was stewing for quite a bit. And then my boys came back and they told me kind of the details. And in that moment, it was like, you know what? I get it.
Yeah.
I didn't then have the family I have now, wife and kids, but I could empathize with that situation.
Certainly.
And say, you know what? If I'm you and I'm put in that same predicament without any real practical way to fight back.
Right.
Now, some hear this and they're like, I'd just go guns a-blazing. They're like, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't.
Okay, tough guy.
Hey, you know what? Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't.
Sure.
But if it's you, your wife, 5 young kids, and 9 guys with guns, and you're sitting there at your kitchen table unarmed, that probably isn't an option at that point in time.
Yeah.
But if I'm that guy, I'm doing the exact same thing.
Right.
I'm doing the exact same thing to be able to spare them. So you know what, bro? I get it. No hard feelings. And it just allowed me to kind of just release that and move on and then move that focus elsewhere.
Yeah. I would imagine that was an absolutely essential piece of your recovery, right? I don't think you would have been able to achieve what you did if you wouldn't have had that emotional release.
Yeah, it would have been tough.
Yeah, bitterness is a poison pill for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
That's powerful though. So for those listening, I want you to draw that out of Nick's story. It's the gunfights and everyone loves the war stories, but like that again, humility to empathize with that man's situation, and it's still wrong, right? But obviously you didn't wish this happened, but to make peace with that is, I think, something that our culture doesn't practice very often anymore. And that's something that really stuck out to me hearing your story. Because I kind of reflected back on like, where in my life am I holding even a little bit of resentment towards someone or something that I need to release, because it's just a limiting factor.
Yep.
And it just draws, it pulls your own life down. It doesn't do anything productive. So
now I want to jump on what you just said, man.
Yeah.
And I'm not breaking your balls.
No,
It's a
go for it.
phenomenal point. You know, when you say like what this guy did was wrong, and it was right around the tail end of this deployment that I don't want to say this, my perspective of my adversary began to change. And I think this is a somewhat natural progression as someone that stays in this industry for quite some time.
Okay.
You come in and it's emotionally charged, almost like a degree of hatred towards your enemy.
Yeah.
Right? You're evil, I'm good, and I'm going to come serve justice.
Yeah.
And that aggression and emotional charge is what gets you on the bird or gets you on the truck and what you're leveraging when you're going to work.
Right.
Against the man.
Yeah.
Against the man. We had been through so much in this deployment. And guys being wounded to varying degrees, guys losing their lives prior to me being injured with the leg, that my interpretation began to kind of shift a little bit. And it was, you know what? I believe what I believe, and you believe what you believe. And who's to say which one is right or wrong? In like the grand scheme of things. Like if you really zoom like way out, I have my beliefs, you have your beliefs. You're willing to stick to your beliefs to your own death. As am I. We're both here to conduct business, and let's just see who has the better day today. That began to be more of my mentality when I was getting on the trucks or getting on the bird to go to work that day or that afternoon or that night. It was less emotion and less visceral hatred towards the human and more of a spiritual or higher degree understanding of just our chosen professions and our chosen lifestyles. You know, they say like one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And it just depends on your vantage point.
Yeah, that's
and we
true.
have ours and we're Americans and red, white, and blue, and I live and breathe that daily. So I get it. But it was kind of towards the tail end of this deployment that I started to have maybe a deeper understanding or just a more zoomed out understanding, depending on how you want to kind of look at it. So I was moving in that direction, which I think helped me get to that kind of forgiveness and empathy stage of this particular incident.
Okay. That's fair. I received that, I guess, correction or, you know, and it obviously now we're post the, you know, the kind of fall of Afghanistan, if you will, the whole withdrawal and everything. And it's a very conflicting topic. So it's hard to use the right words about it if you've been there. But yeah, what you're just talking about right now, I probably need to reevaluate my own experiences about that and separate the emotion from what it was. Cause I mean, I'm sure to them I was the invader, you know?
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
So, hey there. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. Our mission is to reach as many men as possible and equip them to be excellent family leaders. We believe that by inspiring and equipping men, we can change bloodlines and positively impact our culture. You can join us on this mission and partner with us today by doing one of two things. First, go to your favorite podcast platform, whether that's YouTube videos or Apple or Spotify, Google, etc., and leave us a review. The way the algorithm works is that it really values reviews, and this helps promote our stories to get them out to more people. The second way you can help is by sharing your favorite episodes with friends and family. Help us get the word out so that we can make a difference in our culture. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you join us in our mission to change lives. That's a great point. Man, there's so much to cover about your story. I guess just read the book to get all the details. But long story short, right? You go through this process. You want to get back on a team. You want to deploy again. You want to keep doing it. And I know I've heard you talk about it. So you weren't married at the time, but you were dating your now wife, right?
Yeah.
And I think you had a very hard conversation with her. Like, this is something I've got to do, and it's going to be all consuming for a while.
Yeah.
And can you just talk through that, how that conversation went, and then I guess grace or space is the right word that she gave you and supported you through. Just talk through that whole process for us, because I think it's kind of the unheard side of the story.
I love this story because it's just a testament to the people around me and their impact on me that enabled me to get to where I am right now, sitting across this table from you. I had just gotten out of Walter Reed. I moved in with her.
Okay.
Her name's Tony. And I was there about 2 weeks or so. And at this point, even prior to me being discharged from Walter Reed, I'm already mapping out my game plan for when I get back to North Carolina, I get back to Bragg, to my unit. I mean, that's like to the minute. Like, here's how I currently live, which was incredibly structured and dialed in, and here's how things are likely going to change for the good and for the bad. For the good, meaning additional assets, like our unit strength coaches, dietitians, sports psychs, all these assets I can start to leverage. But then also for the bad, because now there's going to be more distractions and more options. Right. When you're in Walter Reed, you're in a bubble. Yeah. There's nothing else really there other than just the physical therapy and the rehab sessions and the doc appointments. Like, you're in this contained bubble. Right. You go back to kind of, quote, normal life, and there's all the things. Yeah. There's the restaurants. There's Netflix. There's, like, all unlimited options on what you want to do, what you could do. So I get this thing dialed in, and I'm kind of fine-tuning it, and I'm getting ready to go, and I'm back home living with her for a couple weeks, and I grab her, and I sit her down, and I'm like, hey, babe, we need to have a talk. And she's like, okay, what's up? And I'm like, this is what the rest of my life is going to look like, at least until I am successful with this mission that I'm on. Right. And it's dialed in, man. And actually, I have it's in the book. Yeah. Right. It's like to the minute of like how I would live. Highly structured. And I don't know how long it's going to take for me to complete this mission, but I do know that I have to go all in on it. I won't be able to live with myself if I bail, if I find an alternative, if I give it 50%, I won't be able to live with myself. Yeah. And I understand if you don't want to be a part of this. Now, this is early on, this is during like the courting phase, right? With like the expensive dinners and the cologne. It's been a few dates. Yeah. And like, you're really putting this like best version of you forward. Right. Which eventually may slowly kind of deteriorate, but this is where we're at in our relationship. Right. So I'm at like, I don't want to say rock bottom, but I'm in a whole different place than that. And I fully went into that conversation, George, expecting her to say, you know what, like, this sounds a little extreme for me. I don't think I want to like get involved with this right now. Yeah. That was what my expected result. And I could see our future. I knew that what we had was real. I could see the kids and the dogs and the white picket fence and like the things we have now. I could see it then. I knew it was real. But I also knew that I had to do this. And I was willing to sacrifice that beautiful potential future for this, which was really hard to do. Yeah. Really hard to do. Yeah. And to your point, not only was she supportive of that, but she became my number one asset. She became my number one teammate. She was on the ride with me. And I just give her so much credit for having that foresight and that strength to make that unusual, perhaps, choice. And then what I love about this story particularly is because I look at the family we have now, and I look at the amazing life I get to live and our amazing kids, and just how many at different points over the last decade could it have just gone a whole nother direction? Right. And these young, amazing studs that we have now just wouldn't exist. And just what a tragedy would that be? So I had to do what I had to do. And without her having that strength and resilience to not only be alongside me, but support that wholeheartedly, these two amazing humans just wouldn't exist today.
That's amazing.
I think that also touches on the point, like you talk about in the book, where you've got to be willing to do what you need to do and put aside what you want to do. And I think your wife, Tony, is a woman who's worthy of a lifetime. And you saw that when you saw that she was agreeing that you needed to do this. And she agreed with that mindset. And I think that's such an important thing that we have to find in our wives when we're looking for them. And you've clearly found it. So my question for that is, how much more did you excel because you knew you had somebody in your corner like her?
It's tough to put a metric against it. Right. I want to say like times a million. That was like the first number that came to mind. Yeah. I don't think you can quantify it. Yeah. I don't think I could quantify it. What I do think, and I live in the world of possibility. Yeah. I do think that it would have been extremely unlikely for me to have been successful and achieve that desired end state without her.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You would have had a lot of what ifs to constantly be battling. But we had a recent guest actually talking about how, he had to make a pretty big life change and credits his wife with really, giving him the strength he needed to see it through. And he talked about how the love of a good woman can make a good man great, and it's such a beautiful thing that, a strong marriage, at this time not married, but when you're working towards that and you see the future and you see the picket fence and kids and dogs, it like unlocks something in us as men. We aspire to be more than we ever were before. It's like a total wake up call. Like I've got extra responsibilities now, and I think that's why like to downplay the differences between men and women is such a disservice to both, to marriage, to kids, and we see it happening all through our culture.
Sure.
But you're an example of where you were certain she was going to say, "Nah, that's too much. No way. I'm not on board." Yeah. And instead, she did the exact opposite. And now look at everything that both of you have gained because both of you were willing to put skin in the game. You know, like what a great example. I want to move just a little bit past the whole recovery process. Let's summarize real quick. You go through a huge process. You had to get like special testing to prove you could perform as a Green Beret in a ODA capacity, not just like serving in staff. Go through all these tests. You make it through. I know you had a question about like how much cover from the top, or how much of a risk did your chain of command take? Maybe ask that one.
Yeah. So with you were wanting to question, because these people were close to you, whether they were doing it almost out of like a brother, they're trying to
like
help
obligation.
Yeah, like an obligation. Like, so you were saying, look, I don't want that. I want you to hold me accountable. I want to be somebody who is valuable, who's an actual asset out there, right? And so one of the things that you talked about was Jimmy 2 times, right? Your mentor. And so how much of an impact did Jimmy have as a mentor for you in your recovery process and in your acceptance process of becoming a Green Beret again? And then eventually, here in a little while, we'll talk about how maybe that was applied towards your fatherhood and towards your life outside of
Jimmy, who I just talked to a couple days ago. The short answer, Brandon, to the question is he's still an influence on me, today. So going on beyond a decade at this point.
Wow.
When I eventually had the realization that I was going back to a team, and this is as I was going through this proving myself process. I was like 4 or 5 evaluations in.
Okay.
Up to that point, I was fueled off of, I need to do this for me. This is who I am. This is what I do. Competitiveness, stubbornness, prove the naysayers wrong, prove myself right. Passion. This is what it was. And then I woke up in the middle of the night in a panic because I realized I was going back to a team. And I hadn't thought of these guys, even though they were physically around me daily.
Right.
And for one, I felt an enormous wave of guilt. I felt just like a horrible person that I hadn't thought about them yet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am such a piece of shit. And this, I got to fix this now. Going to work, and I'm talking to the guys. At this point, I'm working as an instructor, and they're on the team. But we're in the same area. We're in the gym doing stuff, and I grab these guys. I'm like, dude, first off, I apologize because I've been so narrowly focused on this, highly emotional for me, that I haven't even seen it through this perspective, which is unfortunate. They, of course, accepted my apology, and they're like, dude. And I said, guys, like, have you guys talked about this? What's your perspective on this?
Sure.
And they all kind of gave me the same answer. And it was, we've talked about this dozens of times. The answer is, we don't know if this is going to work, but we want to be the ones to find out.
Right.
And I was
that's brotherhood right there.
It is. Yeah. And that's also why I was questioning them. To your point. I'm like, but like, is this just out of a place of love? Because you love me and you want to see me happy. Right. Are you thinking through this analytically, tactically? Have you really gone through this at all? Or is it just, you're my boy, we love you, keep going?
Right.
So I questioned their opinions on it.
Sure.
And eventually I had a conversation with Jimmy, and just the timing of it, which is also just a huge factor in a lot of things in life, is just timing. Man. And, Jimmy was working also as an instructor in the same company that I was in, and he was set to go take my former team as the team sergeant, which is the senior enlisted leader.
Right.
And he grabbed me, and he saw I was having a rough day. It was that day. And he just happened to walk by my office and looked at my face, saw that something was up, walked in, closed the door behind him. He was like, "What's up with you?" And of course I'm like, no, I'm good. He's like, "No, you're not good. Sit down. And what's going on?" And I just fully like opened up. Pretty emotional conversation. And when he gave me the response, that was almost the exact same as the guys. only he added, you know that my first obligation is to the team.
Right.
That's it. And this was going to be his second run as a team sergeant. That's why we call him Jimmy 2 times. That is incredibly uncommon.
Yeah, I was going to say that's rare.
It's rare.
Yeah.
So he already lived the team sergeant life in extreme conditions. He knows exactly what he's getting himself back into and what we're about to go into as a team. That little extra layer of respect towards him and his awareness of the importance of the ODA as a unit was the differentiator for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, man, if it's coming from you, it's coming from my boys who I love and respect, it's coming from Jimmy.
Sure.
It gave it just enough of an extra bump for me to be like, roger that.
But there's two really beautiful things about that. One, you had the emotional intelligence to step back and say, okay, I've been too hyper-focused, and you started checking yourself. And then two, he had the leadership ability and the capacity to say, hey, look, I can tell he's in a distressed area. Let's solve that. Let's pull him in. Let's get this addressed. Let's have the hard conversation and then move forward, right? And so I think that's something that I've seen with a lot of the military guys is it's beautiful to see that leadership is such a strong quality in what you guys have. And so I know we'll talk about it here in a little while. I know he's got some things to say, but I just wanted to point that out because it's a beautiful thing to see leadership so naturally expressed.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was going to say you responded with vulnerability, right? He pushed to try and get to the heart of the issue, and you allowed vulnerability to open up, and it became a weapon, right? That ended up being the, I don't know if validation's the right word, but it was the reassurance that, no, my mission is sound and everyone is on board with what I'm trying to accomplish and they understand the risks and they're willing to accept it. And so you wouldn't have got there if you wouldn't have opened up, right? You could have played the game and had the tough guy routine going on and you may not have made it, right?
Correct.
So who knows? But long story short, you do make it. You get through all the evaluations. They say, yes, you're greenlit, be back on a team. You make multiple deployments, right? And so you are the first Green Beret with an above-the-knee amputation to deploy on an operational detachment alpha to combat multiple times, right?
Correct.
So pretty impressive feat. So let's wrap up Army stuff.
Cool.
I want to, the final point from all of that experience before we talk, let's talk Nick the father and Nick the husband. Obviously your experience is very unique, very extreme. You know, I think in the book you talked about, like, you know, the odds of you surviving were so astronomically low. You were quite literally the exception to the rule, right?
Yeah.
But you firmly believe that, like, I don't need to have my leg blown off to learn the lessons that you've learned. I can take this discipline, I can embrace these lessons and start applying them in real time to have the exact same impact in my own life or whoever's listening. So can you expand upon that and just really drive that home? Because I think so many people, they're looking for some big event or some big savior type, you know, existential experience to save them from their life. And really, it's, even in your experience, it could have gone the exact opposite way. You could have fallen to despair. You could have just been go, woe is me. And you did specific things on a daily basis that got you out of where you were.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you can use this throughout, I would say, any sector or aspect of life, you know, financially.
Yep.
Are there those once in a lifetime, oh my gosh, moments that just this catapult of returns? Does it happen? Yeah, it happens. More often than not, it's a slow grind.
Yeah.
It's a slow grind. We'll use social media. It's a great example. It's in most people's lives. Most want that like viral post that springboards them from like 10 to like 1 million.
Yep.
If I just get the one perfect thing, the perfect caption, the perfect video. And does that happen? Sure. It does.
Yeah, it's lightning in a bottle. Yeah.
It's just the grind.
Yep.
That's it. That's how it gets built over time. But in today's world where we're becoming more and more conditioned to immediate satisfaction based off of the efficiencies that we continue to build, where it's like, I want a cheeseburger, click. It shows up 20 minutes later, which is still amazing to me that we have that. This is inevitable.
It's a double-edged sword.
I call it the
It's an
microwave
inevitable
society.
evolution of humanity, that we build efficiencies, we become reliant on them, we become conditioned, and we just keep going and going and going and going.
Yep.
You can fight it all day long. It's not slowing down. It's only going to keep getting faster and bigger and keep moving. With me, it's really the same. It's the same thing, and it is not as if when I was in the hospital, some scientist came walking into my room like Neo in the Matrix and rammed a metal spike into my head and uploaded work ethic
Right.
and discipline and sacrifice.
Yeah.
All those things were already there.
Yeah.
And were those character traits already part of my lifestyle at that point? Absolutely.
Sure.
And because I have many accolades that I can look at to say, like, it required discipline and dedication and commitment and all these things, resilience.
Right.
So they were there, as they are for us all, regardless of how often and to what degree we choose to wield these tools. But they're there now. I just simply, this was the catalyst for me to take all those things and put them into turbo drive, and accelerate them, pour gasoline on all of them.
Yep.
Because I knew I had to. I was trying to accomplish something unprecedented that was going to be really, really hard. And again, I didn't give myself an alternative option. This is it.
Right.
So truly go all in. Like, burn the boats. Like, that's it. This is it. Everything's got to go way up. But the capacity to accelerate those things is all just in my mind, as it is with all of us.
Yeah.
These are just simple. They're simple. It's not easy. They're not easy choices, but it is simple.
Right.
This is incredibly simple. There's nothing complex about this. It is simple. It's not easy. It's going to be difficult, but this is a very simple, this book right here, this is as simple as it gets, man.
Read it in one day.
That's it. This is not rocket science. This is basic, simple framework.
Yep.
And it is cultivated through nothing more than a series of choices executed daily.
Yeah.
That's it.
And, I'm just like, I'm at a point where I'm so frustrated with just men in our country in general, because it's just always, it's the blame game. It's someone else's fault. And I'm like, man, you're making the daily choice to make something else in control of you. Are there variables you can't control? Absolutely. We all have our own crap. We all have stuff from our past. We all have stuff in our future we're worried about or whatever. I mean, it's the same picture for everyone. It's just different circumstances, right? Yeah. And I'm not to diminish people who've been through very difficult things either. That's not the point of what I'm saying. But like, every man has to, so if you're listening to this and maybe something's hitting, you have to make the choice for yourself to decide today, enough's enough. I am going to move towards my purpose or my whatever, pick the word, mission, purpose, goal, objective. And you have to make that choice daily. And people are going to try and naysay you. I'm sure you had people tell you, you're crazy, Nick. No way. There's no way you can do this. Think about your health and blah, blah, blah. Like, if you really believe it's what you need to do, or you're put on this earth to do it, then nothing should deter you from that. And I think so many men get so scared of all this other stuff that has nothing to do with them anyway, and they back up. Mm-hmm. They make excuses. Oh, well, it's this, or I just couldn't because of that. BS, man. Step up. And I'm not saying this like I'm some alpha, amazing human being or whatever, but like, my life has improved significantly from embracing some of these principles. Just no more excuses. What can I do? Daily action and living it. And it just gets easier over time. Like you talk about discipline in terms of, especially like diet, right? We want this thing. You want the pizza, you want the ice cream. Sure. But until you want the body more than the fancy food or whatever, eventually it shifts and it becomes your new want now is a need. It's a must have. And so, like, guys, listen to Nick's story. You don't have to be a Green Beret. You don't have to have this crazy background or any of that kind of stuff. Go take action today. So if you hear nothing else from his book and his story, that's it. Like, we all have that choice. And every man who steps up to lead his family, his company, whatever, that's all it is. Mm-hmm. It's just being a little bit better every day. That's so I really want to hit that one because, man, that hit me so good. Let's move to fatherhood, man. I know, so you did all these things prior to being a dad, but you had that vision. This is what I want for my life. Obviously, your wife, Tony, was a huge support through this amazing process. Let's start with kind of a high-level question. Just what was becoming a father like for you, that all the emotion and all that kind of stuff, and did anything shift in you? Because you'd already been through so much, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, I doubt it. But just talk to me about your mindset there.
I'll use it cautiously, but I'd say everything shifted. And I put a picture in the book, and it's the picture of the day my oldest Dom was born. And it's just me holding him, and like, he gets ripped out of Tony, and they're like getting him all together, and then they got to like get him into like another room to like deal with something he had going on, nothing crazy. So they're like sewing her back up, and I'm like losing my mind. I'm a new dad. I'm like going crazy, and like some of the nurses and docs are like, "There's a 6'6", 230-pound maniac, one-legged guy losing his mind." I was really excited. Yeah. So eventually I get a hold of him, and I'm holding him, and one of the nurses took the picture, and it's literally he and I are just eye to eye, and it's this little slug,
Yeah.
like wrapped up like a glowworm.
Yep.
And I'm just staring at him, and we're locking eyes. And I use that photo because it's just so impactful to me, because in that exact moment, boom, my priorities just everything got jumbled around. And all of a sudden it was like this dude, number one, and Tony somewhere right there.
Yeah.
But like I'm holding him, and he's like the catalyst moment. I'm like, wow. All of a sudden, every single thing I thought was the most important thing to me in this world, all of a sudden doesn't matter to me at all right now.
Yep.
Now, do those things matter? Of course they do.
Sure.
But my priorities in that moment just got flipped upside down. And it's something you hear a lot when you're a soon-to-be dad or parent from those that you have around you that are parents. It's going to change your life, and it's amazing. You hear all that. And even when it comes from people you respect, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. And then you live it, and you're like, oh, yeah, my father, for example, like he wasn't kidding. This is true. So it was a pretty big prioritization adjustment for me.
Yeah.
Where even when it was me and Tony, when she became into my life, it was still very much like operator lifestyle, and then like a gap of not much, and then like everything else just kind of ran. Like that was it. That's all I wanted to do, and that was a huge part of who I was. And then you introduce this little dude in the world, and it's like things are going to change.
Yeah.
Which they did. And then just to kind of put a bow on it, deploying as a father was a pretty big shift too.
Yeah.
So when he was 6 months was the next time I went forward.
Dang.
Oh, wow.
So
Pretty
he's
quick.
6 months, I went forward. Tony went forward. She's also active duty.
Yeah.
So her and I both go at the same time. And he's with my mother-in-law. Amazing human, was able to relocate and take care of him. So
Wow.
I have a 6-month-old, and now her and me are both forward, 2 separate AOs working. And it's when you're going on mission, when you're going on target, and it's time to go to work, it's 100% focus on that.
Yeah, it has to be.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's part of the job. It
It
can be
is.
hard to do.
Yeah.
You're like complete and total block out. This is it. Boom. But all that matters is right here. But in the times in between that, when you're going through your train up, you're training. This is while I'm forward. You're training your partner force. You're
Yeah.
training internally. You're doing your rehearsals. You're doing mission planning. You're doing all these things that we do before we go to work. That was where I saw my son as a tool for me to take advantage of, because when I'm on mission, I'm on mission. But I can leverage him and my need to get back to him towards the attention to detail now as we are prepping to go on target. Right? When I'm on target, I'm not thinking about my son at all. At all.
Yeah, you can't.
Prior to, not only can he be there, but for me, he needed to be there.
Yeah.
Because it was every single one of these details matter. Because I'm going home to that kid.
Yeah, I like that,
so
man.
good.
It's a very honing pressure, right? And so I like that too, because I think a lot of us, have to travel for work, or you're away from your family for a lot of reasons. The natural tendency is to just fall into like, well, I miss them a lot,
Right.
And it's almost a useless emotion. It's real because you love them, like with every fiber of your being. But I love what you just said, because you can weaponize it and
100%.
take that fierce love you have for your family, and then pour it into your work, right? Whether it's military or you're an over-the-road trucker, whatever it is, I got to get home to my family. So that's an amazing distinction. Thank you for sharing that. Your oldest is 6 now,
He
right?
is.
Obviously, they see the leg.
Oh, yeah.
How much yet have you talked to, they know daddy's a Green Beret to some extent, right? They don't really know all the details, I'm sure, but how much or little have you talked about that? Because it's kind of a unique challenge for you to kind of explain to them what happened without, shattering their innocence. But
Yeah. My wife and I, when Dom was about 3-ish and began asking questions, her and I sat down, and at one point we were like, how do you want to handle this? Do we want to make this like fluffy, or do we just want to tell them the truth? And her and I were both like, let's just tell them the truth.
yeah,
And that's it. I'm like, okay, cool, roger that. So, right from, hey, daddy's a soldier, and what I do is to protect America, and you kind of, you play into
sure.
that a little bit
Yeah.
to try to reach the mind of a 3-year-old.
right.
I got hurt at work, and a bad guy shot daddy,
Okay.
and that's part of my job. But look, I got a new one, and I'm good to go. And that's really been kind
Yeah.
of the synopsis of it.
That's
And
good.
as he's gotten older, he's asked more and more questions, and I give him more information to play around with. So he fully knows what happened. He knows enough to know that Daddy's a soldier. He protects me and Mom and the country.
Yeah.
He knows that when I go to work, there's a chance that I can be hurt, that I was by the hand of a bad guy, but that I'm not only okay, but I'm potentially better than I would have been.
Yeah.
And like I can work. He sees me able to work through that.
Yeah.
And now he's 6 going on 7. He'll be 7 in April. He almost cannot wait to share this with his friends.
That's cool.
So like I go to his school. I just recently did like a Daddy and Donuts day. Just go hang out in the cafeteria, and I walk in, and even me as a 2-legged guy, I would typically get some looks.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't exactly blend, I guess we could put
Yeah,
it.
you're just slightly larger than me.
Yeah.
A
Bald
little
head,
bit.
tattoos, slightly larger than average size. Got it. And then you add the robot leg, and it's like, what is going on right now? So I'm walking into his cafeteria, and like the whole place stops. And it's like, it's not only the kids, but also some of the parents. They're
Sure.
like, what is this?
Yeah.
What's happening right now? Which isn't anything new to me. But my son, Don, when we were doing it the first time, he was almost like, and I even prepped him. I'm like, bro, we're gonna walk in. People are gonna look at Daddy. Daddy looks different. I'm different. Not only okay, but it's also gonna be incredibly valuable. And just these chances to kind of explain some of this stuff. But even with that prep, when it hit him, he was kind of like almost in a state of shock.
Right.
And then we get settled, and soon enough, some of his buddies are coming over and saying, "What happened to your leg? What happened to your leg?" And Dom immediately was, hey, my dad's a soldier. He got shot by a bad guy, but he's okay.
That's
and
great.
It's just like that right there is what we're hoping for,
right.
That level of transparency. And he gets it, and he's not only that, but he's proud of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Well, and one important point here is that it teaches resiliency to your child. Like you're modeling resiliency because your leg's lost, but hey, it's just a leg, right? To you, and you bounce back, right? And you're showing that in real life. And so one of the questions that ties in perfectly this is, what traits or skill sets did you have that you got from the military experience that you want to translate to your children?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. You hit one already. Possibly the top is resilience. I'm not sure that there's anyone out there that's reached a degree of success, regardless of how you want to define that term, without a degree of resilience.
Yeah.
Assuming earning is in the term of definition of success, or achievement, right, is in the term of success, then resilience is a requirement.
Yes. Yeah.
To a degree. And you could scale that depending on a variety. But I think it's a constant. You need to have that. So I see this as an opportunity daily to live that.
Right.
And, kids listen, but they watch and they absorb.
Yeah.
It's what they see and what they feel more so than what you say to them.
Right.
So I have the chance to show my kids what you just described.
Yeah.
Every single day, and they get a chance to see and feel the challenges that come with that. There are days where I'll go 12, 14 hours upright, and I'll get home and I'll be hobbling a little bit.
Yeah.
My residual limb, my stump, will be beat up, and I'll be a little sore. And so he'll notice that. He'll be like, "Daddy, you're walking funny." I'll be like, "Yeah, my leg's a little beat up, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take my leg off and get into my wheelchair."
Yeah.
Which in itself requires a degree of humility.
Yeah.
Again, that alone took me months to get to that point. Even at the hospital, I refused to be in a wheelchair.
Yeah. And you made such a cool way of previewing it there, which was you weaponized humility and you weaponized gratitude. So can we dive into that a little bit too, since those are things that clearly you're going to teach your kids?
Yeah, gratitude may be the magic bullet, the special sauce that we're all looking for.
Yeah.
We all want that one thing, right? Oftentimes to the point where how I get that a lot.
Right.
I teach that, and we have clients, and we work and we advise on that. In today's world, you respond to that with, let's say, discipline, and you'll get many eye rolls. Like, oh, someone else is going to talk to me about discipline, even though it's a foundational requirement.
Yep.
We want the thing now, and while it almost certainly isn't a thing, gratitude may be as close as we have to that special. That special sauce.
Practice it daily.
Because what makes it powerful, in my opinion, is not the ability to deploy it when things are going right. Like when we're winning. Mm-hmm. It's easy to be grateful. You hit the game-winning shot, buzzer beater, press is going crazy, and I want to thank God and my teammates and my family. It's easy to do that then, and that's a great thing to sustain. Let's keep that.
Sure.
What I'm suggesting is the power of gratitude comes when you can deploy it and you can wield it when things are going bad, like when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
When you're losing and you're failing and it seems like the wheels are falling off, and you're able to deploy gratitude then. That's the secret power of gratitude.
Yep.
Because not only can you be appreciative of what you do have in those hard times, which requires focus and mindfulness, these other tools that many of us want to just blow off. Yeah, the wheels are coming off. I keep getting it wrong, but look at what I do have right now.
Yeah.
There's that, but there's also the appreciation for the lesson that is about to be learned as a result of things going wrong, as a result of failure. That's the power of gratitude.
Yeah. Virtually every guest we've had on this show has in some way or shape or way said almost the exact same thing.
It's
where
true, man.
You can be grateful for the bad things that have happened to you, even if they're super messed up, right? We've heard some real trauma on this show. And when you're able to even be grateful for, like for you, right? Look at all the lessons you've learned from this horrible thing that happened to you, and the man that you've become on the back end of it, and now you get to pay it forward, sharing your story, right? What a powerful tool. So I agree with you. It might be the magic bullet. Might be the most effective thing.
Yeah, it might be.
Beautiful example. So let's get a little bit more fatherhood stuff. I guess you already kind of answered this with like building family culture, with how to handle hard things. But what other things do you do to build family culture and kind of instill in your sons to where when they go out into the world as they age, Lavery's are this, Lavery's do this, and they won't bend to external pressure because their identity rests in their dad and their mom and what the family exists to do?
Yeah, a lot of things come to mind. I say being a man of your word comes to mind first when you mention that, when you ask that. And today's world, perhaps that is not quite as valued as it once was.
Yeah.
When you sign your name on a piece of paper, or you look someone else in the eye and you shake their hand and you say, you make a commitment.
Yeah.
There was a time when that was essentially ironclad.
Yeah.
Because your reputation and who you were was what carried you and what garnered you support of people around you was part of your survival. Really. You had to uphold that.
Yeah.
Because if you reneged on something or if you didn't follow through, you may have just lost some support that could literally keep you alive if you go like all the way back. And today is, again, technologies and efficiencies. We are not nearly as reliant on our neighbors and even those we associate with as we were. Like the world's gotten really small.
Yeah.
So, but for some of us, that still means something. And, one of the lessons that my wife and I are currently instilling in both our boys is when you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Yep.
And odds are, at the time of you saying it, I'm going to clean my room when I get home from school. At the time of saying it, it's easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's in the future. And then guess what? The future becomes the now, and you probably don't want to do it, or you might not want to do it.
Right.
But you need to do it because you said you would. That's one of I think the principles that I would consider to be a success as a father. If my son walked away with just that, being a man of his word, I would consider that a win.
And that's one where as dads, you got to walk the walk on that one, because your kids will ask you to do something or they want to go to and if you make that commitment to them and you break it, man, you shatter trust in a way, and it could be small little things. Yeah. And that's something I've had to check myself on a lot, is when you're tired, you're stressed, or whatever's going on, there's probably more productive, quote unquote, things you should be putting your attention to, or you feel like you should. And your kid asks you to do this little thing with them, take the 5 minutes and do it, man, because if you break that trust, you keep ingraining disappointment in them, they're not going to come back to you.
Yeah, it's particularly challenging for those of us with ambition.
Yeah.
And these lofty dreams that, I got one shot at this life. This isn't a dress rehearsal. I'm going all in.
Right.
Whatever that looks like to a person is going to require an enormous amount of time, energy, effort, money, all the investments and costs. And when you got kids, how easy is it for us to just give them the crumbs?
Right.
How easy is it? It's so easy. And it's easy for us to justify, and sometimes understandably so, I'm doing this for them.
Yeah.
I get it. You're going to work 18, 20 hours a day to the bone to provide. And it's a difficult balance. I'll use the word balance. It's a difficult line to try to walk.
Yeah.
Because if you can provide and have all the things, whatever it is, But if you're doing that, the result of sacrificing your entire relationship with them, who's molding the minds? You may be putting food on the table and a roof over the head and keeping the electricity on, which I know is hard. And I've been in that survival, paycheck to paycheck, grind it out mode many times in my life. I get it. I've been there. Who's cultivating these minds?
Right.
And what is their interpretation of you? And is it really, can you blame them when you say, go do this? And they're like, no, like, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So are you giving them the crumbs, or are you paying that first, and then everything else becomes a secondary priority?
Yeah.
And this is a difficult question to ask.
Yep.
More difficult to answer.
And it's the one every man has to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what makes that.
And
That's
if
part
you,
of what makes
and
it
if
so
you
hard,
don't,
man.
it's extremely costly. And I think a lot of guys figure it out way too late.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing you can't do is outsource your presence, right? You can't. That's the one thing in your life. You can outsource a ton of stuff, even in education and stuff, but you can't outsource you.
Right.
You know, you have to be the one. And one of the things I tell my kids is your words have to match your actions.
Fact.
And your thoughts have to match those words as well. So like you've got to have all three aspects. So thoughts, words, actions, all of them have to match. And one of the things I say is Daddy always keeps his promises. And my kids know that. They're like, Dad, you promised. And like they'll call me on it. They'll say, you promised and you always keep your promise. I'm like, you're right. Let's go do it.
There's
And
that humility again.
yeah, and that's a call of keeping me accountable too. You know, like, and I let them. I have a healthy enough relationship with them where they can call me out on my stuff and say, "Hey, Dad, you promised," and I'll say, "Absolutely, let's go do it." And I show that humility. Say, "All right, whatever I was doing, it's not as important as this because you get now and you're not promised tomorrow, right?" So, yeah, it's a big priority for sure.
I got this from my mother, and I'm sure this wasn't an original thought from her. This isn't a dig at my mother, amazing human, but she says, "How do kids spell love?" T-I-M-E. And obviously, I guess it's more well known. But she hit me with that recently. It was probably 6-8 months ago. You know, hot in the paint. I'm still active duty.
Yeah.
Trying to build a company.
Yeah, man.
It just, you know, and in the gym, all the things, man. I live it. I get it. And at one point, I was probably getting a little too aggressive. And I'm fortunate to have amazing people around me that will be candid and hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And she's one of them. She's here. She's my youngest primary caretaker during the days. And at one point, I walked in and in a very motherly, loving way, said that. How do kids spell love? T-I-M-E. And that's all she needed to say. And she like walked off. And I was like, Roger that. That was it. I get it.
I get it.
That's awesome. I mean, that raises a good point too. Like, you know, I think a lot of people look at people out there getting after it and, you know, they're successful in all these different arenas of life and they think that they just got there on their own. Like what you just described is exactly what we try and harp on a lot here is you can't do it alone. Like so many of us try to just shoulder the weight of life on our own. It's like you have to surround yourself with other people, like what you just said. Sometimes it's that hard conversation, the hard thing you need to hear. Other times it's the motivation or the shoulder to cry on type of thing. But like going into life solo, it may work for a while, but you're gonna crumple at some point.
Yeah,
so
you will lose the war.
Oh yeah.
You may win some battles
Yeah.
with this lone wolf, self-made ideology.
Yeah.
You may win some battles. You will lose the war, and you're going to lose to the person or the organization that has the humility and the forward thinking to recognize their gaps. So a degree of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Brutal honesty.
Yeah.
And then go out and find assets, team members, community members, a tribe to surround themselves with to fill these voids, to fill these weaknesses, to build you up and to leverage and rely on.
That's right.
That's who wins.
Yep. I think we have time for like 2 more questions. So I'll ask one and then you can ask them the one we ask every guest. So if you only had one piece of advice to give fathers, what would it be?
You know what? I'll go with this, man, because we were just talking about kind of the work-life balance, ambition versus love and TIME.
Okay.
I feel like it's connected, and I truly believe this. And I learned this lesson from Hal Moore, right?
Okay.
He retired as Brigadier General Hal Moore.
Yep.
He was Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore in Vietnam. The movie We Were Soldiers, played by Mel Gibson, plays Colonel Hal Moore. And an amazing warrior, amazing soldier, amazing leader, and also husband and father to, I believe, 5 young kids.
I think so. He was Catholic, I think, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Very religious, very Catholic. And he was asked at one point, how do you balance being a good soldier and a good family man? And his response, which I think was brilliant, was, I'd like to think that being good at the one makes me better at the other. And I think that's incredibly profound, and I agree 100%. And it took me a while to see that as the two-way road that it is. And here's why it's tied to ambition and professional lives and go get after itness with our desires and dreams while having a family that's depending on us and that we love at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Hal's point, Colonel Moore's point, General Moore's point is that one can leverage the other if you choose to. Yeah. And for me, it was pretty easy for me to see how the character traits and personality traits and attributes of being a good soldier could be relayed to my family.
Certainly.
Discipline, work ethic, structure, commitment, all these things. Well, if I apply them to my family, it's going to make me a better husband and father.
Yeah.
That was pretty simple for me to figure out. What was more difficult for me to figure out was the other way. And you think about some of the character traits, personality traits, attributes of being a good husband and father. And it's things like compassion, patience, empathy, these like squishy emotions that most of us type A's want to run from.
Right.
Because it's making me uncomfortable.
Yep.
I don't want to talk about compassion. I want to talk about my max effort deadlift.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Or my shot group or like whatever the thing is, which I get. I live in the same world.
Yeah.
When I was able to see that what my kids were teaching me and what my wife was teaching me to be a good husband and father and supporter and provider for them, I could be deploying that inwardly towards my profession, my professional ambitions, whether that's as a soldier, an entrepreneur, both.
Yeah.
And that two-way road, to General Moore's point, began to open up for me. So both provided opportunity to leverage against the other. My recommendation would be view your life's priorities and aspirations as ways to also enable the others. One becomes a fuel point and a bed of resources, a tool bag, a toolkit to deploy against the other.
That's great.
I'll tell you, it was difficult to do it, especially in a hyper type A world, but even in team life with these savage maniacs getting after it.
Yeah.
Seeing them respond to some of these leadership traits and influence tactics and tools became undeniable.
Yeah.
This absolutely works. Yep. And I am able to do this as a result of my need to be a good husband and father, them teaching me these different attributes and then deploying them the other direction.
Yeah, man. I definitely, I finished company command recently, and I think I was 10 times the commander I would have been because I had a break in service and I was a husband and father for a while, and I got to learn a lot of those lessons you were talking about, and I was able to pour that back into Army stuff where I would have been a closed-minded, probably arrogant and cocky, won't listen to anyone type of guy if I wouldn't have had those experiences. So it's such a powerful tool to make that two-way street. I love that example.
And dude, I got to hammer this quickly, and we said it a couple times, man. You can preach to the choir all day. If you don't live it by example, forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it. It is easy for us to get off the tablet and then you're on the phone 2 seconds later.
Right.
And pay attention to what you're doing because they are. And that is how you are molding their minds.
Right.
Are they listening? Possibly. Not. They are not absorbing nearly to the degree of what they are witnessing and feeling you do.
Yep.
Are you living the way that you want them to live?
Yeah.
If there is any single area in your life where that answer is no, you need to make the adjustment.
I agree.
You need to make the adjustment for you, right? This is the extreme ownership.
Yes.
You live what you want your kids to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the golden rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to create these young, decent, hardworking, capable human beings as fathers. Awesome. Are you that?
Yeah.
And what areas are you failing that? Or what areas are suboptimal for you?
Yeah.
That's the way to create that impact on that little dude.
Yep.
Yeah, intentionality is so crucial in my opinion. And, one of the things that falls into that is protecting them. And so one of my questions was, you're exceptional at assessing threats. So what is the threat that our children here stateside face, and how can we protect them as fathers?
The biggest threat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest threat. Like warrior mindset, does that help protect them? Like what do we do?
I would say the biggest threat, and I'll caveat this by saying it's also an amazing opportunity, is something that we've mentioned already, and that's immediate satisfaction
Yeah.
Yeah.
and being conditioned to that just being the way it is. Probably one of the greatest threats that comes to mind. These kids are being conditioned to, I want something and I can get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First off, we're the ones that built all this. Okay? It's easy to look at the kid and say, get off your tablet
Yeah.
or social media or whatever the thing, Xbox, whatever the thing. We created that.
Yeah.
We created the internet. We created, so these kids, and likely we put it in front of them at some point.
Yeah.
So before you want to bark at these kids, whether they're yours or someone else, these kids these days, they're all lazy.
Yeah.
We did that and handed it over to them.
Right.
This is normal for them. They don't know otherwise. So
That's a great point.
turn that around. Look yourself in the mirror.
Yep.
We did it. Whether you invented the internet or not is irrelevant. Our generation, we're the ones. Okay, we created all
We
these.
popularized it. Yeah, we
100%.
consumed it and made it what it is.
We
Yeah.
created the tech. We created the efficiencies. We put it right in front of them.
Yeah.
So let's pause for that on a second. Just take it easy on that for a second before we want to hammer down on a 12-year-old who's on their phone all the time, or all he wants to do is be on TikTok. It's like, yeah, we created it. We put it in front of them. But as we get more and more conditioned as a society for immediate satisfaction, just becoming more and more automated and more easy to access and become real, that's a very dangerous slope for anyone to go on. Because
So moderation and putting space and time between things, like keeping it, like we're in a microwave society, like you said, and that's such a hard thing to uningrain in somebody that's born and raised in it, right? And so, yeah, like with my kids, I try to draw them back. I'll be like, if you want tablet time, you have to do this. Like you have to read a book for 30 minutes, and then you get 10 minutes of this.
Sure.
Or, there's got to be something that moderates that, where it also shows that, hey, hard work can give you relaxation and reward, but there's got to be a balance to it. And that's such a delicate balance, in my opinion.
yeah, because one of the problems with becoming more and more conditioned to I want a thing and I want it now is most things worthwhile in life are going to take time to grind towards.
Yes.
Yep.
And you start to lose out on the value of things like patience and just work ethic.
Yeah.
If I can get the thing now always, patience ceases to exist. There's no
Right.
need to be
Yeah,
patient
it's like a muscle.
for anything.
Yeah.
It atrophies and it's gone.
Yeah.
And if you lose that, patience is an absolute tool and a skill, and it's a powerful one. So that's why I see that as a threat, but also inversely an amazing opportunity. I get a chance to spend time with young people quite regularly, which is personally my favorite target audience to spend time with.
Yeah.
Especially like
Yeah, you get
12 to
cultivate the next
17-year-olds,
generation.
just so impressionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, listen, here's kind of the standardized where we're at. Here are the trends, which opens up an opportunity for anyone that's choosing to do it. Because, in my opinion, things like discipline, work ethic, resilience, sacrifice, these are not going away. But as they become less and less common, those that are able to instill those in themselves and deploy them, man, you will dominate
Yeah.
Yeah.
your competition. You will dominate your peers. If you have just a fraction of some of these character traits and make them just part of how you live, I don't care what you want to do. You will steamroll
Yeah.
everyone around you because the majority are, I want a thing, I get the thing now, I can't get it now, I don't want the thing anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Yep.
I'm on to the next thing that I can get immediately, as easily as humanly possible. You take the outlier that's like, okay, cool, I'm going to go against the grain, I'm going to dial in, I'm going to sacrifice all this stuff, and I'm going to work hard for the next 12 months to achieve this thing.
Yeah.
Opportunity continues to grow in droves right now for those that can see it that way.
I heard, I forget who said it, or I read it somewhere. It said it's never been easier to be exceptional.
It's true, man.
And it's like, what an opportunity. So,
Yeah.
dads, we have that chance to instill those values into our children and give them, I mean, that's the keys to the kingdom right there. Having that drive, moving into this world. Final question. Just a core memory when you someone asks you, what do you love most about being a dad? What's something that just really sticks out to you?
The first thing that comes to mind is like the pitter patter of feet when I get to the door.
Yeah.
You know, it's what's hitting me now as you ask that question. You know, that they hear the garage door open as I come in, And as I get to the door, I hear the little feet scampering either towards the door or like scampering to go hide. You know, it's just this consistent reminder and amazing force that I have to leverage, and it's just how fortunate are we to be able to have these young people in our lives to learn from and to really keep things in perspective. You know, like the perspective that they bring.
Yep.
When business is going to shit and I'm having a horrible time at work and, you know, our budget's getting cut and like all these things, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. It's just like train wreck, dogs and cats living together. And you walk in your house and there's these two humans like looking up, like, Dad's home. Let's like go build a fort.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Whatever, man. None of that stuff matters right now. This is what matters. And that's a gift that we get to live and we get to enjoy.
Yeah, it's such a gift. Nick, what's the best place for people to look you up and follow you, support what you're doing, get involved if they want some coaching or speaking and that kind of stuff? Talk about the Team Machine. Yeah,
our website's kind of the one-stop shop. It's teammachine.com. Machine is MCHN, and that's got links to the socials and to the book and merch and, you know, way to get a hold of me and the team and for whatever you may be interested in.
All right. And once you retire, what's the future look like for Nick? Is it all in on Team Machine or what's
all in?
Okay.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people struggle with transition out of the military, and understandably so. I'm blessed to not only do I know what my next purpose is, but I have the opportunity to start kind of slowly, nights and weekends, building that out now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm eager to see what it looks like when we drop the hammer.
Yeah, man. Well, I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story and your experience. You know, dads, there's an absolute mountain of wisdom in this episode. So take Nick's story, apply it into your life. Action, action, action. It's not talking about it. It's doing it. Imperfect action is always better than trying to build the perfect plan.
Well said.
Thank you so much for your time, sharing your story. It's been an absolute privilege.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, dads, enough talk. We'll see you in the next episode. Oh, yeah. All right, Brandon. So Nick has left the studio, just shared all of his wisdom with us, shared his story. I'll just start with like my initial thoughts from kind of buzzing from meeting such an incredible guy, and then I'd like you to share yours as well. But you know, and it's something that I've met with all the Green Berets I've met is just their humility. Mm-hmm. It's always really stuck out to me because my natural inclination is to be boisterous and like, oh, look at me, you know. And I think part of that is just, you know, it's kind of that false manhood type thing, where you're projecting, but. You know, with all of his accomplishments and everything he's done, he's just so humble, right? Nothing in him is, oh, look at me, look how amazing I am, blah, blah, blah. There was none of that projection. It's just calm, quiet confidence. And it's really convicting to me because it's like, that's something I need to practice more in my life, significantly more. And yeah, I mean, just from the second I met him, that was just true the whole time. Yeah. Just incredible.
Well, I have to say, that's the first time I've ever met a Viking in real life. Guy's gargantuan. Yeah. He's huge and well built, man. And I think for me, the big thing was he weaponizes things.
Yeah.
Like
puts it on offense.
Good
man.
always comes from the bad. Gratitude is something you can weaponize. Humility is something you can weaponize.
Our own kids.
Yeah. And like
weaponize them as purpose.
You can apply it across the board. And I thought that was incredible. Like to be able to have the forewithal to apply all of that, right? That's just it's an incredible thing. So I was very excited to talk to him about that. So
yeah, I when we first sat down in the studio here, my seat was like lowered all the way down. I sat across the table from Nick, and I was like, all right, this ain't gonna work. I'm gonna look like I'm 5 years old here. So for those just listening, Nick is like 6'4", 6'5", and just built like a freaking dump truck, and I am 5'9", 175 pounds. I'm very thin, so it's a pretty comical pairing to have me across the table from him. But man, you talk about presence. That guy's definitely got it. But yeah, man, the weaponization of concepts and things like that was such a great piece. And my favorite, like from the book and from the conversation takeaway is that you don't have to have these ridiculous experiences to put it into action. If you are humble enough and hungry enough, you can take someone's story like that. You can take those principles and put it into action in your own life. And yeah, maybe you'll have a little less drive than he had or a little less of that, but just moving in that direction is going to pay so many dividends into your life. And I think that's what we try and preach on this with every guest.
Absolutely.
But that for me, from his personal story, I think, naturally you want to be drawn to like, oh, well, what an incredible overcoming of impossible odds. And you can get all the same outcomes without any of that pain up front if you take his advice.
Learn vicariously.
Yes.
That's what I tell people nonstop. And, Jordan Peterson, he is the perfect example of what Jordan Peterson talks about when he says you have to be an absolute monster and then you've got to have it under control.
And then control it.
He is the example of that. Like, if I looked that up in the Jordan Peterson dictionary, that guy's face would be right there, Because, like, my God, he's got, one of the things that really stood out to me, too, was I've always had a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. He has a warrior mindset.
Yeah.
So he has not just the growth, but he has everything else encapsulated within that. In my opinion, warrior mindset is just so much better, right?
What does that mean to you, then? Like, define the difference.
Because you can grow into anything, right? But being a warrior is accepting failure and just keep pushing until you find success and having that, like he said, the resiliency and all those things that encapsulate somebody who can be a warrior. And so I think it's more important to be in the warrior mindset than the growth mindset. Now he's literally changed my mind on quite a few concepts because I just see what it does is when it's put into application, right? So he is the perfect example of Jordan Peterson's monster under control, and I loved it. It's awesome to see and experience other people like that and to learn from them. So it was a privilege.
To your point about the mindsets, I actually think growth is a component of the warrior mindset because, and I'm going to talk military stuff for a second here, but like if I'm a commander, team leader, whatever your echelon is of a unit, your obligation is to make that unit as effective and efficient as possible to achieve the outcome. So by extension, growth must occur, right? The guy who's weak at this must get better at it.
Right.
The dude who shoots bad on this thing must get better at it in order so that and so if you apply that to fatherhood, to business, to your personal finances, whatever, you can start reaping that fruit for yourself.
And just coming from the self-help, like my growth mindset is so singular. Like you're saying, it's multifaceted when it's warrior. And so I'm sitting here looking at him. I got to upgrade myself, man.
Good,
I
man.
got to start getting that part going. Because you need to be able to identify your weaknesses, and you need to be humble about it, and then you need to attack it. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, and that's where the brotherhood comes in. Of you and I have very differing strengths and weaknesses, and so that's why our friendship is such a great thing. Because I grow and stretch in ways where I'm weak, and you point out to me in a loving way, like, hey, brother, let me call you up to the standard in this area of your life, and I can do the same for you. And so, man, what an incredible episode. Just, again, want to thank Nick and his whole team for making this a reality. And to those listening, just one more time, take action. That's the whole point of what Nick is wanting you to do, is not to glorify him and how amazing he is, but take his lessons, hard-earned lessons with blood, sweat, and tears, quite literally, and limbs, and actionize them, weaponize them. So any final thoughts, Brandon?
No, that's it, man.
Man.
I had a great time. I'm excited to look forward to more people like him with a warrior mindset because, wow.
So hope you enjoyed this one. We got some big things coming. Stay tuned. We're very excited for 2024. And enough talk, dads. Let's get climbing that mountain together. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify to catch all of our amazing episodes. We will see you in the next one.